4 prophecies of Daniel that are about to be fulfilled. What if I told you that there are 10 prophecies from the book of Daniel that haven't happened yet? What if everything you thought you knew about the end times was wrong? 3 events that will change the world forever? Predictions given over 2,500 years ago that are waiting to unfold, possibly in our lifetime? Could we be living in the last days without even realizing it? Daniel was given visions of the future. Visions so shocking, so precise, that they predicted the rise and fall of empires before they even existed. And now, the final events he described are about to happen. Are you ready? In this video, we're going to reveal 10 prophecies from Daniel that are yet to be fulfilled. By the time we're done, you'll never look at the world the same way again. Prophecy number 1. The covenant with many. This is the prophecy that starts the clock. Not symbolically, literally. When this prophecy is fulfilled, the final 7 years of human history begin. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. This single verse has been studied, debated, and analyzed more than almost any other verse in prophetic literature. Scholars have written entire books about these 23 words. So I'm going to break it down carefully. No hype, no sensationalism, just precision. But here's what makes this prophecy particularly ominous. And this is something that will become crucial when we examine prophecy number 2. The figure who confirms this covenant doesn't just make peace. He inherits a system. And Daniel tells us exactly what that system looks like. Let's read it together. Daniel 9:27 says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate." Now, to understand this verse, you need to understand where it sits in Daniel's larger prophecy. This verse is the final piece of what's called the 70 weeks prophecy. And if you've never studied this before, what I'm about to show you is going to fundamentally change how you view Scripture. In Daniel chapter 9, the prophet receives a visit from the angel Gabriel. And Gabriel doesn't just deliver a message, he delivers a mathematical timeline. He tells Daniel that 70 weeks have been determined for the Jewish people and for Jerusalem. Now, in Hebrew prophetic language, a week refers to a period of 7 years. So 70 weeks equals 490 years. And here's where it gets stunning. Gabriel breaks this timeline into sections. He says that from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah appears, there will be 69 weeks. That's 483 years. Scholars have done the math. The decree to restore Jerusalem was issued by the Persian king Artaxerxes in 445 BC. If you count forward 483 years, using the prophetic calendar of 360-day years, you land precisely, and I mean precisely, in the year that Jesus Christ entered Jerusalem, presenting himself as Messiah. To the year. Some scholars argue to the day. This prophecy was written over 500 years before Jesus was born, and it predicted his arrival to the exact year. That's not coincidence. That's not luck. That's supernatural precision. So here's what this means for us. 69 weeks have been fulfilled. Completely. Verifiably. Historically. But Gabriel said 70 weeks. That means 1 week remains. 1 week. 7 years. The final stretch of human history before God establishes his eternal kingdom. And Daniel 9:27 tells us exactly how that final week begins. Let me break this down word by word, because every single word matters. First, he shall confirm. Who is he? If you look at the verses just before this, Daniel mentions two figures. One is Messiah the Prince, that's Jesus. The other is the Prince that shall come, a ruler whose people would destroy the city and the sanctuary. That destruction happened in 70 AD, when the Romans leveled Jerusalem and the temple. So this second prince, the one who confirms the covenant, is connected to Rome, to what many scholars believe will be a revived Roman Empire in the last days. This is not Jesus confirming the covenant. This is the other prince, the one who rises at the end. But here's what's chilling about this identification, and this connects directly to what we'll see in prophecy number 2. Daniel chapter 7 gives us a detailed description of how this prince rises to power. He doesn't conquer from outside. He emerges from within a 10-king system. Remember that. It's going to matter. Now, confirm. This word is critical. Pay attention. The Hebrew word here is gabar. And gabar does not mean to create or to originate. It means to strengthen, to make strong, to cause to prevail, to confirm. Do you see the difference? This figure doesn't invent a brand new agreement out of thin air. He takes something that already exists, negotiations, frameworks, discussions that have been happening, and he strengthens them. He formalizes them. He confirms them into a binding covenant. This is a very specific job description. If the prophecy said, "Create a covenant," we'd be looking for someone designing something entirely new. But it says, "Confirm." We're looking for someone who takes existing pieces and locks them into place. Someone who strengthens failed negotiations into a binding agreement. Someone who turns years of stalled discussions into signatures on paper. Next, with many. Not with one nation, not with two parties, with many. The Hebrew word is rabbim, many, numerous, great in number. Now think about how unusual this is. Most peace agreements throughout history are bilateral. Two parties, two signatures, Israel and Egypt, Israel and Jordan. Straightforward. But this covenant is multilateral. It involves many nations or entities agreeing to the same framework simultaneously. That's rare. That's complicated. That's diplomatically almost impossible. And that's exactly what Daniel specifies. And finally, for 1 week. 1 week of years, 7 years. This is the duration. The covenant has a defined time frame, 7 years. This 7-year period is what initiates Daniel's 70th week, the final 7 years before the Messiah returns to establish his kingdom. But here's what most people miss about this 7-year period, and this becomes absolutely essential when we reach prophecy number 3. Something catastrophic happens at the midpoint, and that catastrophic event requires a specific building to exist, a building that doesn't currently exist. But preparations for it are underway right now. If Daniel 9:27 is the opening move, if confirming a covenant with many is the event that starts the clock, then what's the next prophecy in the sequence? What has to rise immediately after a covenant with many? Daniel tells us. And it's not just an event. It's a system. Prophecy number 2. The 10 Kings and the Little Horn. Here's what most people miss about end times prophecy. They focus on events. The Antichrist appears. The tribulation begins. The mark of the beast is implemented. But Daniel doesn't just show us events. He shows us the system that produces those events. And that's prophecy number 2. Because before the Antichrist can rule, before the mark can be enforced, before global persecution can begin, a structure has to exist. A political architecture. A framework of power that makes global control possible. Daniel 7:7-8 says, "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and, behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And, behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things." Let me unpack this vision layer by layer. Daniel sees 4 beasts rising from the sea. Each beast represents a world empire. The first is Babylon, the second is Medo-Persia, the third is Greece, and the fourth, this terrifying iron-toothed beast, is Rome. But here's what's critical. The fourth beast doesn't just represent ancient Rome. It represents the final form of human government, the system that exists at the end of the age. And this beast has 10 horns. In prophetic symbolism, horns represent power, specifically kings or kingdoms. So 10 horns means 10 kings, 10 centers of power, 10 rulers who exist simultaneously as part of this final system. Now watch what happens next. Daniel sees another horn, a little one, rising among the 10. And as this little horn rises, 3 of the original 10 horns are plucked up by the roots, uprooted, removed, displaced. And this little horn, it has eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. This isn't just another political leader. This is someone with human intelligence, human ambition, but supernatural backing. Someone who speaks with authority that exceeds his apparent position. This is the Antichrist. But notice the sequence. He doesn't appear out of nowhere. He doesn't conquer the world through external invasion. He rises from within the system. He emerges among the 10. He's part of the structure before he takes it over. And 3 of the 10 are removed to make room for his rise. But here's what's truly chilling about this sequence. And this connects directly to prophecy number 3. The little horn doesn't just take political power. Daniel tells us later in this chapter that he will think to change times and laws. And in chapter 9, we learn he will stop the sacrifices and commit the abomination of desolation, which means this political figure also targets religious worship. He needs the temple. Now here's where this gets directly relevant to our world today. What kind of global structure could produce 10 simultaneous centers of power? Think about what we're watching right now. Regional alliances are consolidating. The European Union, BRICS, the African Union, ASEAN, the Gulf Cooperation Council, economic blocs, military pacts, trade agreements. The world is increasingly being organized not by individual nations acting independently, but by coalitions, by blocs, by regional power centers that speak with one voice on the global stage. And here's what's fascinating, and I want you to really think about this. The push for global governance isn't a conspiracy theory. It's stated policy. It's in white papers. It's discussed openly at the World Economic Forum, at the United Nations, at G20 summits. The question isn't whether the world is moving toward consolidated power structures. That's observable fact. The question is whether we're watching the formation of Daniel's 10-horn system. But here's what makes the current trajectory so alarming. And this is something that will become absolutely central when we discuss the time of trouble in prophecy number 4. The same technology that enables coalition governance also enables total surveillance. The system being built for cooperation is the same system that could enforce compliance. the architecture has dual use. The little horn himself, openly blaspheming God and persecuting believers, because that phase hasn't begun. So where are we? We're watching system formation, not system completion. The architecture is being built, the scaffolding is going up, but the final structure isn't visible yet. And here's the statement I want you to hold on to, because this is the key insight from Daniel 7. Daniel tells us the world doesn't fall into tyranny by accident. It falls into tyranny by structure. The Antichrist doesn't seize power through brute force alone. He inherits a system that was built before he arrived. He steps into a framework that was designed to be controlled. And if that framework is being constructed right now, even if the final ruler hasn't emerged, then we're watching the preparation phase of prophecy. But here's the question that should be haunting you right now, and this is precisely what prophecy number 3 addresses. Even if the political system is forming, even if the ruler is positioning himself, there's still a missing piece. A piece without which Daniel's sequence cannot advance to its crisis point. That missing piece isn't a person. It's a building. Prophecy number 3, the temple and the abomination of desolation. This is the prophecy that makes everything else possible. Without this piece, Daniel's timeline can't progress. The covenant with many can exist. The 10-king structure can form. But the countdown can't reach its critical midpoint without this one element, the temple. And here's what makes this prophecy so urgent right now. And this connects back to everything we discussed in prophecy number 1. If the covenant with many is the agreement that allows temple construction to begin, then the first domino doesn't just start the political clock. It starts the religious clock. One agreement could trigger both. Let me show you why. Go back to Daniel 9:27. We already looked at the beginning of the verse, the covenant with many for 1 week. But look at what happens next. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate. In the midst of the week, at the midpoint, 3.5 years in, something happens that causes the sacrifice and oblation to cease. Now, stop and think about this logically. You can't stop something that isn't happening. For sacrifices to be stopped, sacrifices have to be occurring. And for sacrifices to occur, there has to be a temple, a functioning Jewish temple in Jerusalem where the Levitical priesthood is operating according to Mosaic law. Currently, that doesn't exist. The Temple Mount is there, the location is there, but the Dome of the Rock sits where the temple would be built. There are no animal sacrifices. There is no functioning priesthood offering daily oblations. So Daniel's prophecy requires a future reality that doesn't currently exist. The temple has to be rebuilt. And that's not just Daniel's requirement. It's confirmed by Jesus himself. Matthew 24:15 says, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand." Jesus references Daniel's prophecy as future. He's speaking to his disciples in approximately 30 AD, and he's telling them to watch for something that hasn't happened yet. And he locates it in the holy place. The holy place is a specific location, the inner sanctuary of the temple, not a metaphor, not a spiritual concept, a physical location. For the abomination of desolation to stand in the holy place has to exist, which means the temple has to exist. But here's what's remarkable about this requirement. And this is something that will become devastating when we reach prophecy number 4. The temple isn't just a building. It's a trigger. When the abomination occurs, Jesus says to flee. When the sacrifices stop, Daniel says the time of trouble intensifies. The temple is the fuse, and someone is preparing to light it. Now here's where this gets really interesting, and I want you to pay close attention, because what's happening right now in Jerusalem is unprecedented. There are organizations in Israel that have spent decades preparing for the rebuilding of the temple. The Temple Institute has recreated the sacred vessels. They've woven the priestly garments according to biblical specifications. They've identified men from the tribe of Levi who could serve as priests. They've trained them in the rituals. They've conducted rehearsals of the sacrificial procedures. Red heifers, which are required for the purification rituals before temple service can resume, have been bred and identified. This was international news just a few years ago. Architectural plans exist. Blueprints. Engineering studies. Everything is ready except 2 things: political will and a resolution to the Temple Mount situation. And here's what should make you sit up straight. The current conversation around Middle East peace agreements increasingly involves discussions about the Temple Mount, about access, about worship rights, about shared arrangements. What if the covenant with many that starts Daniel's 70th week is also the agreement that allows the temple to be rebuilt? What if one agreement accomplishes both criteria simultaneously? I'm not saying that's definitely what's happening. I'm saying the convergence is remarkable, and it's worth watching. But here's what's terrifying about this convergence, and this leads directly into prophecy number 4. If the temple is built and sacrifices resume, and then those sacrifices are stopped by force, Daniel tells us what comes next. And it's not just regional conflict. It's not just political upheaval. It's the worst period in human history. A time of trouble such as never was. Now, here's the question that should be building in your mind. If the covenant starts the clock, if the 10-king structure provides the political framework, if the temple provides the religious flashpoint, what happens to the world when all these pieces converge? What does Daniel say happens to ordinary people, to believers, to nations, to civilization itself, when the sequence reaches its peak? That's prophecy number 4. Prophecy number 4. The time of trouble. We've walked through 3 prophecies: the covenant with many that starts the clock, the 10-king structure that provides the political architecture, the temple that makes the abomination of desolation possible. Now we come to the 4th, and this one is different, because the first 3 prophecies describe mechanisms, systems, events. This one describes consequences, what happens to the world when Daniel's sequence reaches its fulfillment. And here's what connects this prophecy to everything we've discussed. The time of trouble doesn't begin randomly. It's triggered by the events in prophecy number 3. The abomination of desolation is the fuse. The time of trouble is the explosion. They're linked. Which means if we're watching prophecies 1, 2, and 3 forming, prophecy 4 is closer than most people realize. Daniel 12:1 says, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was, since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book." Read that phrase again. A time of trouble, such as never was, since there was a nation, even to that same time. Daniel isn't describing a bad decade. He isn't describing a difficult season. He isn't describing the kind of trouble that history has seen before. He's describing something unique, unprecedented, unmatched in the entire history of human civilization, such as never was.